Do you see the 10-day ceasefire in Lebanon as part of a genuine settlement or merely a U.S. tool to temporarily isolate Hezbollah's front and ease pressure on negotiations with Iran?
No, it's a genuine tool. The ceasefire is a component of the greater mediated solution to the conflicts that are going on in the region. If you leave Lebanon out, if you leave the Israeli kinetic action in the south of the country out, it's going to put pressure on the dialogue and the effectiveness of the mediation going on between Washington and Tehran in Pakistan. So there is no question that this had to happen in order for there to be a continuation of the dialogue between the Iranians and Washington in finding a solution to the conflict between Israel, Iran, and the U.S.
To what extent can the Islamabad track be interpreted as a channel for managing the war rather than ending it, especially if Washington seeks an extensible claim without offering a final political framework to Tehran?
We got to be realistic about this. When we talk about the discussions in Islamabad, we're not going to see an immediate permanent ceasefire or an immediate permanent agreement in this conflict in the next 48 hours, the next 4 weeks. It took 2 years to negotiate the JCPOA, and now you're talking about and that was without a conflict involved. Now you're talking about mediating a conflict with several factors involved. You're talking about the Straits of Hormuz. You're talking about the release of sanctions. You're talking about the future of an Iranian nuclear program or lack thereof, and the ability for Iran to defend itself using weapons that it feels it needs. So there's a lot of different factors here. And again, it took 2 years to negotiate JCPOA. I'm saying that this is going to be a constant dialogue for the foreseeable future. But as long as they are at the negotiation table, as long as they are talking, it's going to de-escalate the tension. It's going to remove some of the possibilities that we will see continued kinetic action in the region. And that's going to make our regional partners happy. It's going to help ease pressures on the global economy. And it's going to hopefully end with a permanent peaceful coexistence between Israel, its neighbors, Israel and Iran, and take away the aggressive tension between Washington and Tehran.
Has the Strait of Hormuz become a parallel bargaining chip alongside the nuclear file in the sense that securing freedom of navigation has become an independent Western objective even before reaching a comprehensive agreement with Iran?
Look, the Straits of Hormuz, I think, was an underestimated strategic hold by Tehran. I don't think that the U.S. truly had a grasp of how well they could maintain control of the Straits of Hormuz, and I don't think they realized how big of a global economic impact it would have. When the IMF comes out and says that as a result of this conflict, as a result of the restriction in movement of traffic through the Straits of Hormuz, there's now the potential for a global recession that we haven't seen the likes of since 2008, 2009, that should be a wake-up call. And I think what's happened is that all of these factors into consideration, Tehran has absolutely used it in their benefit as a bargaining chip. I think any sort of back and forth between control of the Straits of Hormuz are going to be challenged by international law. What Tehran has done is in violation of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. What the U.S. is doing is arguably an act of war if they start engaging in trying to actively board foreign flagged vessels. The Straits of Hormuz are definitely going to be in play. It's definitely a strategic point of discussion, and I think we're going to see that be very, very important. Let me just add one thing. There's no way that the global community allows Iran to charge tolls for passage through the Straits of Hormuz. They're international waters. Even though they didn't ratify it, Iran is still a signatory to the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. So it would be a bad idea for Iran to think, it would be unrealistic for Iran to think that they're going to be able to turn the Straits of Hormuz into the New Jersey Turnpike and start putting a toll booth for free passage of maritime commerce. Not a realistic expectation.
Have you spoken in several appearances about inconsistencies in U.S. objectives in the war on Iran? Does this explain the shift from a defensive war narrative to one focused on parallel ceasefires and managing maritime corridors?
I don't even think Washington can answer that question. The objectives change so quickly and so rapidly only because of the fact that they really didn't have a clear set of objectives when they started the offensive against Iran. As a result, they've had to play some sort of strategic catch-up. What they've seen is the fact that this conflict has arguably isolated Israel even more from the rest of the global community. It has arguably reduced the U.S.'s standing as a trusted partner or as a global superpower as a result of these actions. And I think what's had to happen is Islamabad is giving everybody a roadmap to stop a bad situation from getting worse. The United States has a recent history of messing up the end game when it comes to conflicts like this. We've seen it in Afghanistan, we've seen it in Iraq rather, but it does not help the fact that this was more tactical, less strategic, and without clearly defined endgame objectives, could have led the United States down a road that would continue to isolate their soft power and also, continue to put pressure on them politically, both domestically and in the eyes of our international partners.
If the West succeeds in securing Hormuz diplomatically or logistically after the conflict, would Iran lose its most important regional leverage, even if it retains other tools of influence in Lebanon and the region?
No, Iran's always going to have a presence on the Straits of Hormuz unless they change their borders magically. I think what we're going to see is that Iran's presence will be looked at very carefully. They will be able to use the possibility that they could reinvigorate their control over the straits at a future time and date. But I don't think that it's going to be something that is going to be actively a strategic, whether you want to call it a strategic threat, whether you want to call it a strategic concern. Again, as long as diplomatic negotiations continue, as long as there is a continuation of a ceasefire and this doesn't unravel, even though Iran is right there, I don't see this being a long-term point of contention as far as a roadblock, if you will, regarding coming up with a final diplomatic solution to the conflict.